Hello and welcome to Book of the Mouse Club, Episode 11, Tuesday, September 25th, 2018.
Morning, monsieur.
Where are you off to?
The bookshop. I just finished the most wonderful story about a beanstalk and an ogre and
That's nice. Marie! The baguettes! Hurry up!
I'm sorry, but how can one possibly pay attention to a book with no pictures in it?
My dear child, there are a great many good books in this world without pictures.
I almost bounced clear out of the book. Some bouncing, huh?
Come home or make myself known.
J. Thaddeus Turtle, Esquire. Have you never met him? You will find his story in this delightful little book, The Wind and the Willows.
I've come to return the book I borrowed.
Finished already?
Oh, I couldn't put it down. Have you got anything new?
Welcome back to Book of the Mouse Club. I'm your host, Courtney, and I'm joined by my co-host, Emily.
Hey, Courtney. How's the official start of fall in Florida?
Well, it's about 93 degrees here, so yeah, that's fall in Florida.
Although I guess you guys officially started with Not So Scary in August.
So, you know, it's been fall for a while, but never quite feels like it. I do miss my Maryland fall.
Well, it's not quite fall yet here. We are dropping in temperature slowly. Like, we're mostly in the 70s now, and the mornings are pretty cool, but it's still very rainy like it has been all summer. So hoping for but I broke out my boots this week, and I was like, I'm doing it. It's the first day of fall. I'm wearing boots.
Dress for the weather you want, not the weather you have.
I like that. I like that variation.
Well, we are gearing up for fall, even though it may not feel like it, as we said, with the first of two of our Halloween-inspired episodes. And first up is The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. Now, this was written in the 19th century, and we'll get into all of those details, but it does have a Disney connection since it inspired one of the segments in The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. So Emily, do you want to tell us a little bit about the overall history?
Sure. This was a lot of fun to read. I think this is the oldest, or I guess you should say earliest, classic story we're reading so far. It's from 1820. This was published as part of a collection of 34 essays as part of the sketchbook. And at the time, Washington Irving, this was his first book that he used his pseudonym Geoffrey Crayon. So that was interesting. So people didn't quite know him as Washington Irving. That kind of comes out a little bit later. He was going by that pseudonym. This collection also contains the very popular story Rip Van Winkle. So that was the other story that kind of put him on the map with The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. So that's kind of like the straight up history. You can find that on Wikipedia or whatever. But I did some more digging to try to get some more information. And I found some interesting stuff. So his inspiration can be credited to, I'm getting this from Smithsonian, who did some background checks. We credit Smithsonian a lot on this podcast. They looked and found that during Irving's teenage years, there was an outbreak of yellow fever in America and the New England area. So he had left his town to go into more rural climates because that's where it's more pure air, less likely to get infected. So he had gone to the Hudson River Valley, into Tarrytown, Westchester County of New York. And that's where the story takes place. So his learning of the Hudson Valley, getting to spend time there in the fall, in the Dutch town, Old Dutch Church. So that's where he hears of this legend, but he's the one that's going to make it famous. So it has been an oral history before. And Headless Horseman can also be accredited a little bit to Sir Walter Scott, the Scottish author, that there's a lot of legends out there of Headless Horseman, but it's Washington Irving's story that kind of makes it very classic and that we think of first when you hear the Headless Horseman. You think of his story in Sleepy Hollow. So that's kind of some background on the setting and where his story comes from. It was very popular, and I was curious to try to find how popular it was. I couldn't find anything based on like book sales and whatnot. The story was actually serialized from the collection of essays into newspapers, so it's kind of hard to tell like by today's standards, how we would go by book sales and ratings when it was in a newspaper that people would just pick up and they would pass those around. They didn't quite have, they had mass printing, but not like the scale we have today. And also buying print was more of a luxury than it is now. So it's kind of hard to tell how popular something was except by word of mouth.
Yeah, a lot of books that are popular from like the 18th and 19th century come from those serialized newspapers. And I saw a tweet the other day that was like explaining they were serialized and said that us reading these novels is the equivalence of binge watching these 18th century or 19th century novels, you know, because we're reading it all in one go, whereas people back in the day had to wait for the next newspaper to come out to find out what was going to happen next.
That is interesting. That's a very cool comparison. But something I did find that accredited to its popularity, because I think you and I were going to get into this, have some interesting critiques of this writing and of this story. But what made it so popular and what kind of puts Washington Irving on the map in American folklore is that this is coined the first American ghost story. So it's maybe the first published, not by any means the first story told, but we're a new country, 1820. We've only been a country or 1783, so only like 40 to 50 years. So we don't really have folklore that is original to America. Most of the stories had still come from England, Ireland, Scotland, Europe, where a lot of American settlers, now colonists, New Americans are from. So this is the first time that we have true American fiction that is originated in New York Dutch settlers. So that's very uniquely American. So that's what a lot of people really liked these stories, because it's an American identity. We now have a story of our own, and it became popular around the world. So that was really cool.
Because it's set in a real place, right?
Yes, Tarrytown is a real place. That is where I was saying from the Smithsonian article that's where Irving went in his youth when the yellow fever broke out. So he moved to a more rural section. He ended up in Tarrytown, and Sleepy Hollow is also real. It's a neighboring town.
Gotcha. I think it kind of opens like that. It establishes Tarrytown, which I'm assuming was a more recognizable town at the time. They're like, and just north of here is Sleepy Hollow, which is such a great name.
Yeah.
Like, you just think it's relaxed, easy way of life. Kind of has like a little spooky undertone, maybe.
And there was an interesting thing. So in all this back reading of history, that the yellow fever epidemic had a lot more influence on this story. It keeps alluding to calling it Sleepy Hollow, and the way it talks about and describes the town as being kind of, it vegetates out in the wilderness, like it's untouched. It's like, it seems like you're stepping back even further in time. And that's kind of like when they're talking about the yellow fever, the escape. So I didn't get quite as many yellow fever escapism cure vibes as the Smithsonian article is telling me there was, talking about pure air and in all of the ways we'll talk about Washington Irving's adjectives, the ways that he describes Tarrytown and Sleepy Hollow, that it's supposed to kind of be a metaphor of being cured of yellow fever. And in this case, the yellow fever is Ichabod's superstitions and beliefs in ghost stories, and that's what's affecting him. And this is supposed to be like an area of cure, and it doesn't happen or something. So there's supposed to be a lot of yellow fever allegory in there, and I wasn't quite seeing it, but maybe because I'm not very well versed in that history and what was happening with the yellow fever then.
Yeah.
So I kind of missed that. I was kind of shocked when I was doing it, because I read the story first and then found this article, and I was like, oh, I didn't quite get that, but maybe if I read it another time.
No, I feel like it's so associated with Halloween now, which is probably largely in part due to Disney, which we'll get to after we discuss the story itself. But that's really interesting. Thanks for finding that.
Yeah, so talking about the book, what's your prior knowledge of this story? Have you read it before? Or do you have anything other than the Disney interpretation to go off of?
I feel like I was always aware of it. I shared on a previous episode that Halloween is my favorite holiday. So my dad would take me to haunted hayrides, which are a big thing in Maryland and probably, the mid-Atlantic area. You go to like a corn maze, or you go to these farms and they have actors that volunteer and like put on a spooky hayride, and like you ride on the back of a tractor in a big bin filled with hay, and people jump out and scare you. And I remember there being like a representation of the Headless Horseman at one of these farms, because it's easy to do. They had horses and created an awesome costume. So I feel like I knew it in association with Halloween. And then of course the Disney short had exposure to that. Maybe not the full film as a kid. I don't think it's something that we owned, but definitely like I know the Ichabod Crane song. I think it was in one of those sing-along
I was
songs,
just
like
thinking that, because I was like, I knew the song, but I didn't necessarily watch the short a lot.
Yeah.
But I knew of him.
One of the things, this is going to sound silly, but I remembered it as I was watching the short in preparation for our episode. Do you remember the show Wishbone from PBS as a kid?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a talking dog, and he went into different classic literature. He did a Legend of Sleepy Hollow episode, and I really want to go back and watch that for Halloween. But I remember that, like, there was something when I was watching the short, like a scene, maybe as he's approaching the bridge, I just like vividly flashed back and was like, Wishbone! So that might have been one of my very early connections to it, because I watched that a lot before I went into elementary school. Like in my early years, I was a big PBS kid. But I hadn't actually read the story, so I was glad that we picked to do this. Like, I assumed that you just know the story, and I was like, wait, I haven't actually read this. What about you?
Same. I had never actually sat and read the story before. Similar to you, I just know that the Headless Horseman always was a thing. Like, I feel like just Halloween in general, you just seeing people in costumes or pictures, other movies, and something headless is always present. So the character of a Headless Horseman was not new, has always been there. That wasn't new to me. Similar, I think there was something with a sing-along. There had to have been. Because I know I've only watched the short a handful of times. I only got the DVD last year. I think we used to have it in my house on VHS, and we used to watch it, but I don't remember watching it more than maybe just at Halloween time. So it wasn't like a staple. But revisiting that also this week was kind of interesting and fun. I remembered a lot more, and then there were some scenes I was like, oh, I don't quite remember that happening. So that was cool. Was there anything that surprised you, though, now that you've read it? Something that you're like, oh.
The connection to yellow fever, clearly, that I just learned. No, it felt very familiar to me. Like, I feel like even though I hadn't read it, and we'll talk about this in regards to the film, like, the language is very similar. So nothing seemed too surprising to me.
One thing that did surprise me was when I was reading through those articles after I had read the story, it said, I think it was I forget if it's the Smithsonian one, or it was, I had the website up from Hudson Valley. It's like a visitor website to go to Hudson Valley, and they have a page about the story, because that's one of the things that makes them famous. And it talked about, even though the story never says Halloween, and I was like, wait, what? And I went back through, and yeah, the original text says nothing about Halloween at all.
But does the movie?
The movie does. So when I watched that, I actually rewatched Ichabod about 2 hours ago. When he gets the invitation to the Von Tassel party, the Disney short references it as his annual Halloween soiree or get-together, whereas in The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, it's just a party that happens to take place in fall time, which kind of makes sense. I was poking around a little bit. History, I love history.com, History Channel, great stuff. I use their articles a lot in school. It's great, condensed, reliable history. And looking around, Halloween has always been around, but it didn't become a consistent, popular American holiday.
Commercialized.
Yeah, or called Halloween. It was always Hallows Eve, the day before All Saints Day, whatever. Not until the late 19th century. So later 1800s when it becomes a little bit more popularized. So it's always been a
more
thing,
like
but not
harvest.
Yeah, it was more
time.
harvest oriented. But shout out to You're My State of Maryland. History Channel says that the southern states celebrated more of the spooky side, whereas the northern states, because of the Protestant upbringing and particularly the Puritans in New England, they're against all that stuff. So they didn't celebrate any of that or believe in any of that.
Okay, that makes sense based on where the story takes place and like coming off of that Puritan time.
Yeah, so they wouldn't
All
have
right,
said
very
Halloween
cool.
or anything like that. But that struck me for a minute because the story, as I read it, sounded very familiar to background knowledge I had, particularly from the Disney short.
You
But
just associate it with Halloween, and the
yeah,
Headless Horseman has a
exactly.
pumpkin, and
And I think
pumpkins are Halloween.
Disney, or other outlets as well. Disney is not the first company or movie storytellers to use the Legend of Sleepy Hollow in any way.
Right.
But I think because of the fall nature and the supernaturalness of it, it makes sense to put it before All Saints' Day and in the time of year when it starts to get cold and a little dark outside. So I thought
Spooky
that's what I
season.
thought was interesting.
Well, thank you for finding that. I definitely learned something more in addition to Yellow Fever. Talking about the book itself, let's talk about the writing style, because I have thoughts.
How about you start? All I can say is adjectives.
Oh my gosh.
And
It's
lots
just
of adjectives, mostly about food.
one of my things that I know I need to work on in my own writing is that I'm very verbose. Like I should be more concise when I write things. It's something that I'm aware of, but Washington Irving is even more verbose. It would be, I think we were talking earlier about trying to pick a quote for the end of this episode, and Emily goes, "Oh, this one's 3 sentences," but it goes on for like
A page.
more than half a page and like several lines. That I did struggle with a little bit. I think, having been an English major, and you probably have this as a history major, I know some people, my mom and my boyfriend have described, they read very slowly and like they audibly hear the words as they read. I think because I had to read so much and I've also just been a quick reader, I'm kind of a speed reader. So I'm able to like get through a page very quickly, and maybe I'm not fully reading every word on the page, but like I'm able to absorb it. It's hard to describe, but I was like, oh my gosh, I'm having trouble processing this just because the sentences were so long, and I was like, wait, what is he describing again?
It reminded me when I tried tackling in high school, but also my personal reading, like Jane Austen or other early 19th century writing. And that makes sense. If you compare it to, I mean, he also spent time in England, so Washington Irving has a lot of influence of English writing style, because he did move there I think he actually wrote this when he was in England, based off of his experiences from living in the United States. He had moved to England for a family thing later in life when he wrote this in 1820. So more fun facts. But so I think that style may have influenced him a lot, but also that's just what people were reading. It was very common to write very verbose to show off your language skills and your style and flair. And I had the same issue that when I was reading, I would forget sometimes what was actually happening because he goes on for a page. Or actually, there's even one part. So in the book that I got mine from the library. So most the times this book you find in mostly just a PDF format. It's hard to find it in book form because it's what's the word, public domain, and it was serialized. So it's kind of hard to, like, specific people have to put it into its own book. So I found one that was like a short copy. So it goes on for 2 pages, page 58 and 59 of this version, Wildside Press version. He spends 2 pages describing the appearance of Ichabod and his horse, Gunpowder.
I was gonna say, please don't read the whole quote.
I'm not going to read it, but I specifically wrote that down, and I have in my notes, necessary and like 6 question marks, because he spends 2 whole pages just describing what Ichabod and the horse looks like to get to the party. And I'm like, is it even necessary? It's not description that helps the story.
Right, that's a good note. There wasn't actually like a plot to me. It was just a series of really long descriptions. And I was like, okay, this
Don't
is a
get me wrong,
description
they're
of
beautiful.
the
Like, it's
party.
very poetic. But yeah, plot-wise, it's like he's on his way
would have
to...
enjoyed. I know they say show don't tell, but like I needed some telling in here because like he was describing the pranks that Brom Bones had played on Ichabod, and I was like, just put it in the present tense and make it happen.
Yeah.
There's no dialogue.
Yeah, and that's something actually that's also Disney did in theirs. There's no dialogue in that
Yes.
either, other than the
definitely wanted
songs.
to talk
But
about
I
that.
think there's a difference, though, I think, with a visual representation because you can
Absolutely.
see the body language. I had that in my notes too, that some things that Disney did better. So even though, yeah, it's a good story, but you spend half the time trying to dissect, okay, he's just describing scenery and where I am, and then I had to reread pages just to be like, okay, wait, where am I? What's actually happening?
Yes.
But if you do take a moment, though, like we were reading some quotes aloud, trying to find that quote for the end. It does sound better and move better if you speak it. So I think what you were saying, how you and I are kind of quick readers, maybe just because we read
Right.
so much that our stamina and our pace is just faster. I don't know.
This forces you to slow down. I agree, because
It
when you were
does.
reading and we were discussing, I feel like this would be a good one to like read out loud
Yeah.
to your family or something, like around
There
the
is a
fire
rhythm.
at
So
Halloween.
if you follow all his commas and you follow the semicolons, and he uses alliteration, like it sounds really beautiful spoken than just reading it on its own. So moving forward, though, when you could figure out when you could dissect the plot from the adjectives and the descriptions, what was your favorite part?
I thought he did a really nice job of like building up to the confrontation with the Headless Horseman, because his descriptions in that part seemed a little shorter, like pacing wise. It felt like, oh, there's this thing and that's spooky, but it was about how Ichabod's imagination is getting the best of him as he's riding home. So he's heard this spooky story from Brom Bones at the Von Tassel's party, and now he's on his way home, and it's like, oh, he sees what he thinks is a ghost in the tree, but then Washington Irving describes that it's just where lightning had hit, or he hears this sound, but it turns out to be something rustling. And I was like, that just felt very real to me, because who hasn't been home alone, or, you know, like walking home one night and you think you hear something and it's just like your imagination gets the best of you. So I did think that he captured that part really well, and it does build the suspense for, you know, it's like everything turns out to not be real, but then he has this real confrontation.
I agree. That was my favorite part as well. Maybe not the build up, but the actual chase. And I was a little disappointed because like I wanted more of that. There was so much between the character build up and the descriptions of Tarrytown and Sleepy Hollow and the Dutch settlers and their stories that when you finally get to the Headless Horseman, and maybe because we've been spoiled, we know this story that like that's what we want to get to, then it was only like 3 pages. And I was like, no, I wanted more. This is where I wanted you, Washington, to like really drive this home. But in that chase sequence, I had read it aloud to you when we were trying to pick a quote. And I've read it aloud to myself because at one point I was reading a little too fast. But what I noticed, though, is the rhythm that he writes this in that chase, you naturally speed up. And I was like, oh, wait, but it's a chase sequence. So it makes sense that rhythmically this sequence, it made sense. And I felt it. I was like, oh my gosh. And the tension is building and he's running and he sees the Headless Horseman and he's finally getting to the bridge and Pumpkin gets thrown in his head. So like it does build very well. And I think the rhythm of his words in that section were finally that purposefulness that I wanted.
Yeah, very nice. Guts, though, this is definitely a product of its time.
Yes.
Can we
for sure.
talk about Washington Irving's observations on wooing women and
Yes.
women in general?
Let me read this. So I was offered to read the chase scene, but like we said earlier, it's like 3 pages and that's all 3 sentences. But, you know, we're also a product of our time, modern women that we are. So this stood out to me when I saw this section this is when Ichabod had just like set eyes on Katrina, and he's starting to, think and fantasize about being with Katrina and whatnot. So Washington Irving, he is posing as a narrator. So this section of talking about wooing women comes about when Ichabod first meets Katrina, sets eyes on her, and he is so passionately in love with her at first sight. And he's thinking about, how do I impress her as I've impressed all the other people in this town, etc. And what's interesting is Washington Irving, as the narrator, he is posing. So the story's narrator is considered a Dutch historian named Diedrich Knickerbocker. Great name. He breaks the fourth wall here for a second, and, for a page. So let me read to you what he says about wooing women. So he breaks the fourth wall to tell us his views on women. I profess not to know how women's hearts are wooed and won. To me, they have always been matters of riddle and admiration. Some seem to have but one vulnerable point, or door of access, while others have 1,000 avenues and may be captured in 1,000 different ways. It is a great triumph of skill to gain the former, but still a greater proof of generalship to maintain the possession of the latter. For man must battle for his fortress at every door and window. He who wins 1,000 common hearts is therefore entitled to some renown. But he who keeps undisputed sway over the heart of a conquest is indeed a hero. And then it goes on to talk about how Ichabod and Brom are in this prank war, trying to make each other look bad in front of Katrina.
He kind of says it's all Katrina's fault at one point. Early on, I found a quote that I was like, oh, we got some 19th century sarcasm here, almost, or satire. He says, this is early on, we talked about later that, Ichabod's imagination gets the best of him, and very early on they kind of allude to that and how he'll swap scary stories with different women of the town as he enjoys their food and teaches their kids, and then he walks home and the same thing happens. So it's a bit of foreshadowing. So it's referencing that, and it says, all these, however, were mere terrors of the night, phantoms of the mind that walk in darkness, and though he had seen many spectres in his time, and been more than once beset by Satan in divers shapes, and in his lonely perambulations, yet daylight put an end to all these evils, and he would have passed a pleasant life of it, in despite of the devil and all his works, if his path had not been crossed by a being that causes more perplexity to mortal man than ghosts, goblins, and the whole race of witches put together. And that was a woman. And I was like, oh, okay.
So I think how he talks about women in this, so you really don't hear from Katrina. And same in the Disney short, she has no dialogue, she's just there. So I feel like we still see this imagery of women, particularly in romance, not like today, that it's like these mysterious creatures and we don't know what they want, and it's the only thing that can strike fear into them is the right woman, but I feel like she gets a little bit of a negative light, being seen as the flirt.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
He just kept calling her a coquette. In that description, though, there was something that made me laugh, but it wasn't supposed to be funny. He's describing Katrina, and he's describing her appearance, and the last line is the tempting stomacher of the olden time, and withal a provokingly short petticoat to display the prettiest foot and ankle in the country. And I'm like, that ankle though, her petticoat is so short that it shows her ankles. Ooh.
But yeah, but I feel like, so this is all totally product of its time.
Yeah.
But I feel like with you and me being in the time that we live in, I'm reading this kind of defensively, you're just making her out to be, this fuller, scarlet harlot woman when she hasn't even said anything or done anything. Maybe she has short skirts because it's hard to clean mud out of your hem. Who knows?
True.
Or she grew and hasn't had time to get a new dress.
Dat ankle, though.
Ankle. But what did you think about, though, his portrayal of woman in this? I wish she got a little bit... I wish we could hear from her.
I felt like the film as well kind of carried it on. She's just seen as this big flirt. It's really unclear kind of who she's going for in this. Like, is she stringing Ichabod along to make Brom Bones jealous? Is she genuinely interested in Ichabod? Is she truly torn between the two? Like, that was not clear to me in either the film or in the text.
Yeah, they both pose that rivalry between Brom and Ichabod, and that she does have a role in egging both of them on. So you could think of this maybe two ways. Maybe I'm being a little harsh saying, she's portrayed negatively. I think the attitude of women by Ichabod and Brom is pretty negative. They talk off the bat that as much as he loves Katrina, all Ichabod is thinking about is getting the inheritance of her father's farm and having all the food and all the riches because she's from one of the wealthier farm families. So I think their attitude towards women. But when I was watching the Disney portrayal of her, part of me was like, yeah, I get it, girl. You don't get much in, 1820, so make those men work for you. She's like, oh, carry my stuff. And like, she knew how to work the room to kind of display it and have some control over who she was. So I think you could look at it both ways.
Yeah, because in the short, it shows not just Brom and Ichabod, but like all the men of the town fawning over her and like carrying her bags for her and just like doting on her every whim.
Yeah, setting up her picnic and throwing down coats so she can walk across the mud, all that stuff. And part of me, though, when I watched it, I was like, oh, she knows exactly what she's doing.
Oh,
so in that portrayal, I felt kind of more of a woman empowerment of like, she knows the kind of world she lives in, so she's just making the best of it. But you don't get a lot of her in Sleepy Hollow. So I kind of wish we had a little bit more. But if you were Katrina and you had to choose, you have these two suitors, Ichabod and Brom. If you had to choose, absolutely had to, who would you pick?
I really don't want to pick either because, like you said, I think, having not read the story, you're like, oh, Ichabod's the hero of the story in the way, even though he's going to meet his untimely demise. Or maybe not. But he's not a likable character.
Yeah,
like, it's
he's
very
not.
clear in the short and in the book that he's just... Katrina's beautiful, so she's a good catch, but he's after her father's money and the farm, and he just basically goes around to his students' houses and eats all of their food that their moms make and, like, pays special favor to... the ones who make the best food. So it's like he's not really a good guy.
He's not a good teacher by any means.
No.
He's using... it's clear that he wants to move up the station. Like, even in 1820, being a teacher was not, the best occupation or the highest thought of occupation to be, other than the fact that you are probably the most educated person. And he got some esteem. So I think he flaunted the teacher aspect a little bit, that he's like, I'm well read and I know stuff, and he's the choral master, so he has a lot of skills and he uses that to appeal to people. But yeah, he's like, I want to get out of the schoolroom, I want a rich farm that I can boss people around and do stuff for me.
I guess I'd pick Brom then.
I think I'm the same. I think I would pick Brom because even though he's a prankster and he's just kind of boastful, he might also be after money. We don't get a lot more character description other than that he's jealous of Ichabod's time with Katrina. But I'm also like, well, at least he can, if I had to marry him, at least he can provide for me. If he got my farm, he probably knows how to use it and like work a farm and keep it prosperous. Like, who knows if Ichabod would drive my farm into the ground because he doesn't know how to do that.
Brom tells good, scary stories.
He tells stories, and
that's a plus. Love me a good scary story.
And I feel like Brom is also just, even if you don't like his character, he's at least honestly himself. Even if you're like, he's a little bit pompous or he's a little bit of a show-off, I wouldn't say a Gaston. I don't know if he's that far.
I thought of No, he's not that far,
similar,
but I definitely got Gaston vibes watching the
show. I feel like the only thing that's
I agree, because there's not really dialogue in it, like, you don't get that he's like completely full of himself.
Yeah, from what we have, I don't think he's as full of himself as Gaston is. But he definitely wants the prettiest girl in the town. But Yeah, I think I would also begrudgingly have to go with Brom over Ichabod, which I think that's another thing if we go back to talking about what surprised us, is I'm surprised after reading this and watching the short again that I don't see Ichabod as a big hero of the story that I thought he was growing up.
Agreed. I definitely picked up on that, both in the animation and in the book. I think one of the most iconic things about this book, aside from the chase itself and the encounter with the Headless Horseman, is the ambiguity of the ending. Like, it's kind of just like both the short and the book are like, some say he was never seen again, others, said he married a witch widow out in the countryside. So, like, did he make it? Did he run away? Was he scared to death? What do you think happened to Ichabod?
Yeah, the end says, the old country wives, however, who are the best judges of these matters, maintain to this day that Ichabod was spirited away by supernatural means. And that's the story that the town stuck to because it sounded cooler than he moved away or admitted defeat in his quest for Katrina. So they offer all three of those endings. But it ends with or was he? Was the Headless Horseman real?
So what do you think?
I don't know. So
I want to believe the horse. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think we both want to believe the horseman. Just because you want that horror. I don't know if I was.
No, you want the spooky vibe where, like, the person, like, looks into the flashlight and is like, and he was never heard from again. Ha 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 ha. And then you have to, like, go to bed and think about it all night.
And that's what makes the story iconic. That is one thing, though, that I did like in the book better than the Disney short, was I thought the Disney short wrapped up. So the Disney short also gives that ending where they're like, some say this, some say that. But I felt like it was so fast. Whereas I think after the speed and the buildup, again, reading aloud, or if you actually read it slowly, Washington Irving does slow down a little bit in his language. He drops a lot of the adjectives until he describes fall at the end. So you're left with that, like, did this happen? And he gives you that space to ponder the different endings or possibilities of how it ended. Whereas Disney, I thought, wrapped it up a little too quickly. It was like, this happened or this happened. You decide. Done. So I liked the ending in the book a little bit better. But yeah, I want to believe the horseman did it.
I agree.
But realistically, it probably could have been Brom being like, yo, get away from my catch. I've been courting Katrina for more than a week.
Yeah, but he still could have scared him to death.
Okay. So you mean like that, so the ending as in Ichabod died, not so much that.
Or just like,
just
was
ran away.
Never heard from again. Just like doing that.
So with our want for spookiness, this was technically classified as a gothic, I think it said it was a gothic horror story. So for 1820, gothic horror, do you think so? Do you think we would classify this now as horror, or do you think another genre fits better with this?
I'd say it's like light horror. I don't know. When I think horror, I think like murder, guts, and things like that. Can I just call it like a spooky story? Because it does have those elements, and we discussed that earlier. I think it's a horror story of its time. We've discussed the writing style and the content. Like, it was modern when it was written, and it does reflect the old wives' tales and like people gathering around and telling scary stories. I feel like those stories evolve over their time. Like, in modern times, we have the babysitter who's alone and the phone rings like, have you checked the children? So it's just like it's very representative of its time. So I would classify it as that. Just, it might not be as like graphic as we'd think and expect today.
So looking up the word gothic, I'm on dictionary.com right now because I was curious, what do they mean by gothic horror? So gothic meaning Germanic language, so coming from any manuscript evidence of any Germanic language. So there could have been some influence maybe on his writing style or on the folklore on Washington Irving that it's getting this classification of gothic. But I feel like the horror part, maybe for 1820, that just means the superstitious. Those spooky stories where it's like now when we think horror, we, like you said, more blood and gutsy and like thrilling, whereas horror
Yeah.
then might have been more the superstitious, and they just
Supernatural.
yeah, supernatural. That's the word. And they
No, but
just
superstition plays a part in this as well.
yeah, they describe throughout that Ichabod is very into superstition, and he carries, you know, history of witchcraft, and he likes those kinds of stories, and he's very particular about, you know, being home before dark and all those things. So he believes in that. So that lends itself. But I feel like for me to personally classify it as even Gothic horror, we only got that in the last fourth of the book. You spend most, or I keep saying book, but it's a story. I'm just reading it in book format. You spend most of the story in a love triangle. So I feel like it's more of, you know, angsty teen romance of 1820 than it is of a horror. But I guess the supernatural is what classifies it. But I feel like most of the story, you're set up in this love triangle of who's going to win Katrina. And then the spooky, superstitious side is what Brom uses as a ploy to kind of get Ichabod to back off.
So you've talked about two kind of elements there. Why do you think this story was so successful in 1820?
So I think, you know, every I feel like romances tend to have success. But being that serial piece, you know, getting a little bit, ooh, what's Ichabod doing next? What's Brom doing next? That might have helped drive the enthusiasm. But also I think that I liked what I read about having its roots in American culture. And if you look at American short stories and folklore, it does start in that early 19th century. So having those roots, I think, is what made it popular. It's like, this is our story. And it's a ghost story, but it's an American story. And we're still developing that identity as Americans in the early 1800s. We just won the Second War with England. So we're still like establishing that we're a legitimate country with an identity. And I think that fits having this story as well.
Yeah, and I think it draws on and even kind of self-references the fact that people would tell these stories together around the fire. So it's kind of like recognizing that these are the tales that like to be told.
Mm-hmm.
Like the, you know, books probably weren't as readily available. So a lot of storytelling was oral, and this continues that and can be told in that way. So it draws on the themes and elements that they liked back then.
I could definitely see that even if one person, you know, brings the newspaper that they got the story in to someone's house, they read it, they finish it, you could see someone picking up and going like, oh, wait, I know another ghost story. And then it just keeps the ball rolling, telling stories and that spooky folklore.
Absolutely. So let's segue into the Disney portion of this. And we've kind of referenced it throughout, but I just have some brief history on it. This was released in October, so Halloween-ish. It was October 5th, 1949. But this is a short film. It's only 33 minutes, and it was paired with Mr. Toad in The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. And in my research, I found a lot more talking about how like Walt had wanted to do Mr. Toad shortly after Snow White, but then the World War II, of course, hit, and they kind of go into these package films, which we discussed a bit in our Walt Disney and American original biography in episode 9. There wasn't as much out there about Sleepy Hollow on like why he chose it. I'd love to do The Wind in the Willows and Mr. Toad at some point on this podcast. Side note.
No, it's a good
there's
one.
There's a lot more out there. But I think, you know, they were just interested in the story, as you said. It's a piece of American folklore. So they packaged them together as 2 short films. It later aired on television. I think that was the great thing about some of those package films, is that they could be repurposed for a new medium with Walt's Disneyland television show. So just about 6 years later, again in October 10/26/1955, it first aired on television, and then it was released on video in 1982, but this was separate from Mr. Toad. So it was released theatrically as that package, but then they're like, oh, these can stand alone. But then the feature, the two together, came out on Laserdisc. Shout out to the grandpa from Carousel of Progress in 1992. And then on home video, which is probably what you thought you had owned it on, in 1999. And then later there's been subsequent DVD and Blu-ray releases. So this was actually the last package film. They did quite a few: Melody Time, Fun and Fancy Free, all of those, Saludos Amigos. This was the last one and was followed by Cinderella. So starting to turn around. If you listen to Diz Order, which we've referenced before, they're going through every Disney film in order. I know they kind of like struggled through the package films because a lot of them are just like shorts and music. Like even shorter shorts, like we're talking under 10 minutes. So they did like Mr. Toad and Ichabod because it is a return to form for Disney in terms of like, there's a story and characters and setting them up for that success of what a lot of people consider the golden age with Cinderella, Peter Pan, Alice in Wonderland, all of those. Something that was interesting that came up when I was reading for that television release that I mentioned, when it was just Sleepy Hollow, there was a 14-minute animated prologue that was added. So in the feature, we actually have part of it in our little book intro segment where there's a narrator and he's like, who's the best characters in literature? Basil Rathbone narrates Wind in the Willows, and then Bing Crosby transitions and narrates the Sleepy Hollow segment. Because they were splitting it, it's not going to open with that bookcase scene. For Sleepy Hollow, they recorded a 14-minute animated prologue recounting the life of Washington Irving, but that's never been released on home video.
That would have been so helpful for our research.
Right. Or like just a great bonus feature. I went and checked the Blu-ray just in case, and it just has a storybook version of the film. And
all right, like, I don't have the Blu-ray. I have the like old school DVD because I bought this a while ago. I think when I'm following with Disorder and watching them in order, and I just bought whichever version was cheapest on Amazon so that I could watch it. And same, I had this storybook thing, but no special features. Oh, that 14-minute thing of Washington Irving's life would have been like...
Yeah, that sounds cool.
Very helpful.
Yeah. Interesting that like they did it and then never reused it. So who knows what happened to it. You will be proud of me. I found a 1949 New York Times review of the film. And the headline was, "The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad sees the return of Disney to a realm of pure imagination." So kind of what I talked about before regarding returning kind of like to that true to form Disney story and plot-based thing. But interestingly, the reviewer like really liked Mr. Toad way more than Ichabod's portion. I was like, oh, okay. So we can share actual quotes from that article when we get to Mr. Toad. But overall, he did like the film. So that's kind of the history of the film. Do you want to talk about a little bit about where this appears in the parks before we compare the book and the film?
Sure, yeah, we can do that. The only places I really know of in the park, it doesn't get a lot, but it does get some, and it is helpful with, Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party. So I think the most notable that most people know is the Headless Horseman from the Halloween Party. He takes the place of the Grand Marshal almost, of the afternoon parade, where he leads it, and then there's that 10-minute gap before that parade actually starts.
I was gonna say it's not kicking off the parade, but it's kind of the pre-show to the parade.
Exactly. And I loved watching him the first time I saw that happen.
Subject to weather availability.
That's true.
Because if it rains, I just want to make sure everybody knows. That's my legal side.
Yeah.
If it rains, unfortunately, because it is a live horse, and he goes fast.
Gallopes. It's not a slow trot. He goes.
Slow trot. No, he gallops from Frontierland to Main Street. So for safety, it doesn't always happen, but if it does, it's amazing.
So the year I was I've only been to Not So Scary Halloween Parties when I was in my college program, and the first Halloween party I think is the one I went to with you, and it downpoured. And I don't think he came out because we also got the shortened version of the Sanderson sister show on Castle Stage. It was just not a good Halloween party, other than hanging
But
out with
we had
you.
fun.
We did.
And made the most. We got a lot of pictures.
Yeah, we did a
got
lot
my
of-
memory maker money's worth.
Yeah, for sure. But I went back a second time when I had family friends visit. They went and I went with them, and it was much nicer weather, and I got a really good spot in Frontierland or in Liberty Square, right near the bridge where you cross from the hub into Liberty Square. I was right on the other side
How
of the bridge.
poetic with the book.
And I saw him right there, and it was so cool to watch. And he's big. That's a big horse. And like, it's not just like it's got some, it's spooky. Like, it kind of takes you aback for a minute. You're like, oh my gosh.
When you were in Liberty Square, were you perhaps standing near Sleepy Hollow snack stand?
I was. Although I have to admit,
Another
I've never
reference.
eaten there.
Emily! No, I love Sleepy Hollow refreshments.
I've never been to, like, I walk past it all the time.
The waffle sandwich.
I
I'm
haven't
taking
had
you
it.
there.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry.
There is this spicy I just love chicken and waffles, and it's like this sweet and spicy chicken waffle sandwich, and it's so good. They also do full-size Mickey waffles. Like, if you
What?
like Mickey
How
waffles,
have I never known this?
right? It's like, you get the little Mickey waffles at your breakfast buffet. It is a full-size Mickey waffle with powdered sugar and different toppings.
Oh my gosh.
They also do ice cream cookie sandwiches, and for the Halloween party / October, they have pumpkin spice waffle sundae. If you want to hear more about snacks, please listen to the Mad Chatters episode where I appeared and reviewed some of those snacks. Side note. But yeah, Sleepy Hollow Refreshments is good. I mean, it's really just the name, and the Headless Horseman appears on the sign, but it fits perfectly in Liberty Square because it is that early stages of America theming.
Yeah, and it's kind of nice that they, not all the packaged films get a lot. I guess Mr. Toad, out of this packaged film, he got the most. He got a ride, and that still exists in Disneyland. But yeah, rest in peace, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride in Walt Disney World. But
he also has a statue commemorating the ride
statue
in Walt Disney World in the Haunted Mansion graveyard.
Yes,
so literally R.I.P.
Yeah, literally. But the other packaged films don't get as much, other than the Three Caballeros, because you can find them in the Mexican Pavilion.
Casey's Corner.
Casey's does.
Package film reference.
Casey's Corner's package film reference. But other than Pecos Bills is a package film reference. There's a couple posters, one poster, Willie the Whale.
Yeah, there's little references, but Sleepy Hollow gets more than others.
Yeah, for sure. You get one or two shorts out of the other ones, like we said, Casey's and Pecos Bill, that were really popular, got something, but like the bulks of packaged films, like as a whole, don't get very much. So it's kind of nice that he's still there.
Something recent at Disney that came to Walt Disney World last fall and came back around this season, which I will be attending at the very end of October, is the Return to Sleepy Hollow event at Fort Wilderness Campground. Are you familiar with it?
I am not.
All right, so it runs on select nights in late September and all of October. I think it runs
actual
Wednesday.
Halloween time.
Actual Halloween. It runs Wednesday through Sunday, so just don't do it Monday, Tuesday. And they show the Sleepy Hollow portion in the barn at the Tri-Circle D Ranch. And you get to meet the Headless Horseman and get a picture with him.
What?
And there's a dessert party. So I'm like, really bummed.
So it's all the things you love. Dessert,
it is.
Disney snacks,
photos.
Headless Horseman, and Halloween. But you get to meet the horseman? Oh my gosh, I need to plan next year's trip. I'm coming in February.
It fills up fast though. Like, we tried to call maybe like a month and a half ago. I was like, oh, we should do this. But it's one of those things like you can book 180 days in advance. You could start booking in March. And we were like, if we're gonna go, we go big or go home. So we were trying to get the dessert party one, which like there's 3 tiers. I think like you can just do like general admission, or you can do like general admission, but you get a little Halloween goodie bag, or you can get all of the above plus a dessert party. And I'm like, all right, we're doing that. So we tried to call, and it was like the only one we could get was Monday at 10 p.m. on October 29th. And I was like, all right, it's going to be a late night, but we'll do it. So the dessert party is at 9, so it's between the 8 p.m. and the 10 p.m. showing. So we'll be having dessert before the film. But I'm sure it seems like it's very popular. You never know what'll happen, but
And you get to meet the horseman. That's so cool.
Yes. I'd be surprised if this doesn't return. So if it does come back next year, book ahead. But I also forgot to mention, speaking of viewing this short, it does play during Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party at Mickey's PhilharMagic. That's a treat location, and you can walk through, and it's playing in there along with some other spooky shorts like Lonesome Ghosts.
Is that a new thing in the last 2 years?
It was not here when you were
I went
on
with
your college program, and I think the year after it started. No, maybe. God, we're in 2018. I think it started in 2017. So 2 years after you were here.
I definitely need to come back for a Halloween party. It's so tough with a school schedule, but I need to go to another Halloween party. And clearly I also need to come for this Return to Sleepy Hollow event as well.
Yes. So let's return to Sleepy Hollow and talk about the film itself. Just a few notes other than anything we haven't touched on.
Why do you think, though? So you said that it got a good review, or the package film overall got a good review in 1949. The review and from your research said that this, really set Disney up to bring in that golden age. So why do you think this story from Washington Irving translates well into that Disney short? What do you think made that successful?
Well, I think, it's a short book. We didn't really talk about that, but it was probably 40 to 60 pages, depending on your font. I read it in under 2 hours.
Yeah, it's very fast.
So I think being a short story makes it apt for a short film. I think this is the appropriate length, 33 minutes. They don't try to draw it out with anything. And we talked about how there's no dialogue. I think that kind of was a nice transition with what they were doing with the package films. You talked about how some of them were shorter in nature or music based. This kind of gives you some more characterization, but still keeps that style, whereas Mr. Toad has dialogue and has kind of a longer and deeper plot. I think it translates because it was drawing on what they've done, but using a popular story.
Yeah, I think what also helped was, even though you and I both kind of struggled reading this because of how much description there was, I think that made it translate very well to, because since there isn't dialogue in Washington Irving's story, that helps them have, it's kind of ambiguous a little way in some ways, that, they had a lot of room to play with these characters and draw and animating and setting up the scenes. But there's also so much description of what Tarrytown looked like, of what the food and the characteristics of the different characters, that they could get a really accurate portrayal, but they could leave all the adjectives out because you're seeing it on screen.
Yeah.
So I think it gave them, they were able to trim down and fit in 30 minutes because they were able to take out a lot of that description. Even though Bing does narrate some description, it's still poetic in its narration. But it's not as verbose.
Well, and it's Bing Crosby's voice. So
you can just listen to Bing Crosby.
The dictionary, and I'd be fine.
Yeah, right. So I think that also helped translate it, that this story gives the animators a lot, that they could translate the story very accurately. The story I felt was pretty verbatim. There wasn't really any... it's not like other Disney fairy tales where Disney changed the story completely. It is Washington Irving's story, but they were able to...
Yeah, some of his narration is lifted right from the text. So
yeah.
That was in the book.
But I think the things that you and I said that we struggled a little bit reading the original story, Disney was able to use that and enhance it.
Yeah, I think that's a good opportunity to talk about Ichabod himself. How do you think Disney did with portraying him on screen based on what was in the book?
It is scary. It's accurate. And I think this is the part Bing talks about when you meet Ichabod. He narrates him a little bit. So I'm going to read a little bit from Washington Irving's story of when we meet Ichabod and he describes him. if you don't have a picture, take a pause real quick, listeners. Look at a picture of the Disney animated drawing of Ichabod Crane and look and see if you see all these characteristics. So Ichabod is described. He was tall, but exceedingly lank, with narrow shoulders, long arms and legs, hands that dangled a mile out of his sleeves, feet that might have served for shovels, and his whole frame was most loosely hung together. His head was small and flat at top, with huge ears, large green glassy eyes, and a long snip nose, so that it looked like a weather crook perched upon his spindle neck to tell which way the wind blew. To see him striding along the profile of a hill on a windy day, with his clothes bagging and fluttering about him, one might have mistaken him for the genius of famine descending upon the earth, or some scarecrow eloped from the cornfield.
That's Ichabod. He's so lanky. Ichabod has a very distinct animated appearance, and now I know exactly where that came from.
Yep, the weird shaped head with the big ears, but like they animated it in a way that it didn't, like in the reading it makes him sound very awkward and unattractive, but I think Disney softened it. Still had, the big ears, he's very tall, and how he walks, he kind of like flows like a scarecrow. Everything's just kind of like waving, his arms and legs kind of wave and wiggle around him, but the animation made it kind of fun, and they softened, I think, some of the features. But yeah, it is Ichabod to a T. They really captured his characterization from Washington Irving.
And the same for Brom Bones, right?
Yeah, big guy, blustery, rides on his horse. He gets described as an urchin a couple times, so I think they made him sound more like, not like a gang member, but like he's known in the town, and like people roll their eyes like, oh, it's probably just Brom Bones and his friends wreaking havoc. It's fine. It's the neighborhood boys. So I think they really personified all the characters to a T, as well as the sleepiness and the smallness of the town.
Can't forget Katrina at that angle, though.
Yeah, she did have a short. Although I think Disney shortened it.
I know it's shorter. It's like up to
it
her
wasn't
knees.
just her ankles. Like you saw some calf in there.
There was a kneecap, maybe. I don't even know.
Getting back to our favorite scenes, how do you think they did with the chase scene at the end? What's your opinion on that? I agree.
Best part of the film. I think I was like trying to think about the timing. It's almost the last third of the film. I mean, it's not that long. It's 33 minutes, but I feel like the chase scene's not ending because just kind of ends.
I think
it's like 10 minutes.
Yeah, I think Disney fixed that problem that we said, how we wanted more of that the gothic horror. We wanted more of the chase and the Headless Horseman. And I think because animation lets you play around with sound and Ichabod getting spooked up on and seeing things in a much longer way that words can't, that I think Disney fixed that piece.
Yeah, exactly what I talked about with the building and like the different things that he sees. They played with that in animation, and like so it builds in the same way. Like specifically in the film, he hears what you think are like clops of a horse, like on the ground, like dun, 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 dun.
Yeah.
But then it turns out it's those like weeds whacking the trunk of a tree, and he's like, oh, like you see his relief physically. So that the descriptions within that portion of the book really lent itself, and I think that's like the penultimate piece of the film.
Yes, I agree. I think that solves some of the problem of it makes it more of a superstitious, spooky story because you get more time with him or with the Headless Horseman. And I really like the part where I love the horse, Gunpowder. How like, and I think in Washington Irving's he sounds like just a pretty normal horse with a strong name, but like they kind of make it ironic. They're like, it's Gunpowder, and then he's like this really sleepy, scaredy cat horse.
Mm-hmm.
That
and
fits
they do
the description
that's
of Ichabod
very
too.
Disney animation. Like the horse has more personification than a normal horse.
Yeah, and I like the because if you look at the horse that the Headless Horseman is riding, it looks more like a traditional horse. But I like the chase scene where they're riding in a circle and like they can't seem to get out of this circular chase, and Ichabod ends up on the Headless Horseman's horse and they're all like riding together. Classic Disney gag animation too.
Yes.
Bring that out.
You mentioned superstition, and I feel like that was also something that they did a good job. They talked about showing, not telling, but this was like really well shown in the classic song. The one's like Ichabod, Ichabod Crane, that one, that whole little number. You see his superstitious tendencies. Like, he's reading a book and not paying attention. He's about to walk under a ladder, but then he goes around the ladder. And you see a black cat about to cross his path, and he like moves the cat out of the way. So I thought that was a good job of, like, for a character that has no dialogue, showing that characterization that then leads to other superstitious pieces at the party, where Brom Bones then realizes, like, ooh, I can spook this guy.
Yeah, I agree. And I think changing the title also made a big difference. So Washington Irving is called The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, and you think you're going to get more of the Headless Horseman legend of Sleepy Hollow, but you spend so much time with Ichabod. But Disney called it The Adventures of Ichabod Crane. So even though they elongated the Headless Horseman piece, I feel like by calling it The Adventures of Ichabod, you know off the bat that this is about this character.
The weird thing in the opening, I think you just watched the short, not the whole Mr. Toad Together, right?
No. Yeah,
okay,
I skipped
so
the
in
opening.
the Mr. Toad Together part, so like it opens with a library and they take books off the shelf.
Right.
Mr. Toad is based on The Wind in the Willows, and that's the book that they pull off the shelf. The book that they pull off the shelf.
Oh yeah, it says Ichabod Crane on the
it
sign.
doesn't say Sleepy Hollow. It just says Ichabod Crane. I was like, is that the book? Like, that was a weird choice to me.
But I think it's
like,
also solves some more of that story disparity where, I mean, they fixed the part where you get more time with the Headless Horseman, but I think calling it The Adventures of Ichabod, that you change the perception of the story that it's about Ichabod, whereas the whole time I'm reading Washington Irving, I'm like, get away from Ichabod. I want to know more about the legend.
What's the legend of Sleepy Hollow?
Exactly. So I think the title helped along with that. So which did you like better overall?
This is our final take here. I liked the short better.
Same.
Yeah, I was like, I really wanted to like the book, and it wasn't a bad book, but you know, we had our criticisms, and I don't want to beat a dead horse or a dead headless horseman, but it's just that the visuals of it really bring the story to life. Far better than my
Maybe Washington Irving was just ahead of his time. He should have been a screenwriter.
There you go.
Not a short storyteller. Although this is, I mean, he has plenty of other short stories that are wonderful, and this is his shortest, apparently.
Is it?
Yes. From something I read, it said it was his shortest short story, and I was like, huh. So I wonder how verbose the other ones are. But
Rip Van Winkle, you'll sleep for 100 years too.
But I mean, he is popular for a reason. I think if I gave it another go, I would want to have it read aloud to me.
Yeah, by Bing Crosby.
By Bing Crosby. I love that.
Where's my audiobook?
Some of the things I loved right away when I started the short was, one, you got the classic book opening, like old school Disney fairy tale book opens. You see the book open, come off the shelf. I love that. But also, Bing Crosby, it's such a product of its time. 1949, you have this big... I would love to know what that conversation was like. How do you just ring up and get Bing Crosby to narrate a film and sing 3 songs for you?
This one takes it for me for Bing Crosby alone. So
yeah, I'm a big fan.
Unanimous going for the short here. One of the rare times where the movie is better than the book.
But at the same time, we can say, though, that it hit every detail.
It did.
So it didn't leave anything out. The Disney adaptation is not really a Disney adaptation. It has some enhancements, but it doesn't stray from the original story.
It doesn't Disney-fy the
exactly
story. I get what you're saying. Like, some of the fairy tales have much darker tones.
And different themes.
This has its own dark tone. Yeah.
Yeah. There's no added characters. It doesn't change the theme. Maybe the perspective a little bit, but it's all there.
That's for the medium. Very nice. Well, put me in the spooky mood. Maybe we can leave our listeners with some other good references for that to continue on. For me, one of mine was The Wind and the Willows. As I said, I'd love to do an episode on that at some point because I do really love Mr. Toad and have a soft spot for him.
I promise you, Courtney will do it.
Yes, 2019. We kind of like have our other stuff plotted out, but we'll get there. So read that in the meantime to pair. But on the spooky sense, I picked a non-Disney piece, and that was Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Do you remember?
I do.
That book? It's like a collection of short stories with like really creepy illustrations.
Yeah.
I would check that out from the library as a kid because I was like into spooky stuff. But I think it draws on what we were talking about earlier about like those old wives' tales passed around and a continuation of what Ichabod and his own friends were doing. Like they passed around the story of the Headless Horseman. That's definitely something of our generation's version. So good one to revisit this Halloween season. No Disney tie-in, so we can't talk about it, but highly recommend it.
So right after you said, was it Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark? You know, I had my flashbacks to, you know, 5th grade and middle school when we would read those during reading in school. But then I had a flashback real quick to add to my recommended sources. One short story that was kind of spooky that I loved when I was younger was The Green Ribbon. Do you remember this one?
That one's in there.
Oh, that one's in Scary Stories? Okay, I couldn't remember if it was part of that.
Oh, so scary.
But yeah, it's just this normal girl, and she has the green ribbon tied around her neck, and her friend, who becomes her boyfriend, then her husband, can't figure out why she never takes it off, but then at the end she does. And so, you know, headless to go with that. So revisit some classic children's spooky stories. But my other
the worst one was the girl where the spider laid eggs in her face, and it's the really creepy picture.
Oh, ew, stop.
Okay. Too scary.
Someone shared with me a YouTube video today with a tarantula in it, and I was just like, I can't do it. I can't do it.
Anyway, what was your other
So my other recommendation is Tim Burton. You know, he has his ties to Disney as well, and he well known for his spooky films. But he did a rendition of Sleepy Hollow, starring Johnny Depp. And that one definitely takes the super spooky route, and it really exploits the legend that this is a Hessian, a dead Hessian soldier from the Revolutionary War, like Washington Irving says. But he's cursed, and there's someone in the town that, I don't want to give the whole thing away, but someone in the town is controlling him. And he's being controlled to attack specific people in the town. So they're trying to figure out, like, what does this Hessian want so that we can get his spirit to go away, but also, like, who's targeting the certain people. So there's, like, this whole mystery to it. But it really plays on the idea that it's the horseman's fault. It's definitely the horseman. And I think most adaptations, it's the horseman, because we like the supernatural and the spooky.
Yeah. I'm going to take that recommendation.
Yeah, I watched that last season. Halloween. I forget I don't think it was on Freeform. I think I was with my cousins and we were looking for something spooky to watch. So I forget if we saw it on TV, or if it was on Netflix or whatever. But I enjoyed it. It definitely has the Tim Burton feel. If you like his style, you'll really enjoy it.
Well, one thing that I really enjoy every Halloween and always have is Hocus Pocus. So that will be our next topic we promised you 2 spooky episodes. I could do a spooky episode every week until Halloween, but we gotta spread out our spooky, save some for next year, fingers crossed. But we wanted to squeeze one more in. So we will be once again joined by Aaron Wallace, who talked about his Thinking Fans Guide to the Magic Kingdom and Epcot, and we promised that he would return for Halloween to celebrate his Thinking Fans Guide to Hocus Pocus. Do you want to give us a little of that description?
Sure. So Hocus Pocus in Focus, the Thinking Fans Guide to Disney's Halloween classic. So here's the back of the book. The Hocus Pocus book fans have been waiting for. You do that so much better than I do, by the way.
Book!
There you go. So in 1993, Walt Disney Pictures released a movie that would change a generation, but it took a while. Hocus Pocus flopped upon release, and critics everywhere scoffed at this oddball Halloween comedy about three wacky witches back from the dead. But then something changed. Far from the forgotten relic it was destined to become, Hocus Pocus has taken its place alongside The Wizard of Oz, Harry Potter, and Home Alone, a bona fide classic that's sure to stay alive for generations to come. Now, in the first and only book dedicated entirely to the movie, Aaron Wallace takes readers deep into the world of Hocus Pocus to learn everything they never knew. He provides a lighthearted but scholarly look at the film in this all spooky, kooky glory. You will learn the fascinating history behind Come Little Children, Sarah Song, and I Put a Spell on You, how Steven Spielberg shaped the movie, why there's all this talk about yabos and virgins, how Hocus Pocus got away with being the edgiest Disney movie ever made, whether a sequel could really happen, and much, much more. Featuring a foreword by Golden Globe nominee Thora Birch, who plays Danny in Hocus Pocus, afterword by Mick Garris, the film's writer and producer, and the largest collection of Hocus Pocus fun facts and trivia ever assembled, this is the ultimate unofficial fan guide for Halloween and movie lovers everywhere.
Love it so much.
And I know this is your favorite.
Revisit this week. It's my favorite Halloween movie, absolutely. And Aaron does a wonderful job discussing the film, which we will get to with him next month.
So you've read this before? This is going to be my first time reading it.
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit on the other episode with Aaron, and I'm sure we'll revisit. We think I was like the first person to own a copy of this book. That's right.
He did mention that.
And post it. We'll have to revisit that. But no, I as soon as I found out there was a Hocus Pocus book, it was pre-ordered. So this will be great, coming full circle in a way.
All right, I will have to do my studying so that I can keep up with you and Aaron on this one. I love Hocus Pocus, but I don't think I've dived as much into it as much as you two have. So I have some studying to do in the next 2 weeks.
It'll be on several nights on 31 nights of Halloween on Freeform, so plenty of time to catch up between now and early October.
And I do own it, so I will watch it for sure.
Very nice. Well, I will take us out with a quote. We are doing one from the film, unsurprisingly, because I didn't want our closing quote to be 10 minutes long. So this is just a little piece from Brom Bones' song about the Headless Horseman that I think fits kind of the spirit, pun intended, of the film and the novel. When the ghosts have a midnight jamboree, they break it up with fiendish glee. Ghosts are bad, but the one that's cursed is the Headless Horseman. He's the worst.
Classic Disney rhyming right there.
Indeed. So we'll see you next time. Stay spooky until then, and have a happy early Halloween.
Get those Halloween costumes ready. Watch Hocus Pocus. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Book of the Mouse Club has no affiliation with the Walt Disney Company. The views and opinions expressed by hosts and participants are theirs and theirs alone. They do not represent the organizations or companies they happen to work for.